This is the CJRB taiga. I first heard about this knife on Knife Center, and I thought it was an attractive design, pretty basic, but I thought it looked good, so I bought it on Blade HQ for $37 in January of 2023. It has a D2 blade and G10 scales. I'm going to tell you all the good things about this knife first. On the pocket clip, the screws are inset so that they're flat, which means that they don't snag on your pocket material. And it's a good deep carry clip, which I like. It carries very deep in the pocket, which at work I'm not technically allowed to carry a knife, but I do have to use one. So I carry one regardless of policy, because it's much better than those little safety blades that companies want you to use. I'm a grown man. I've been carrying a knife since I was like 10 in the Cub Scouts. If I could carry a knife at 10 years old, I can carry a knife at 25. So that has nothing to do with this review, just my opinion on that. So the G10 scales are very robust, and it has full steel liners. So if you prioritize tough handles, then that is a plus. I'm looking in now. They are milled, the steel liners, which is good because it is heavy. I'm going off of my notes, so again, if there's a pause, I'm just trying to read. You can put the video on like 1.5 speed if you want to skip over the pauses. With use, the action eventually became good. It is on, let me take a look in the knife. I think this one is on washers, but I could be wrong. It may be bearings. But either way, after time, the action became pretty good. The flipper makes a really good finger guard when the knife is open, so you don't ever have to worry about slipping up on the blade. And also, whenever you close the knife, you can push, and you know that the flipper is going to stop the blade so that it doesn't come down on your fingers like a knife without a flipper might. It had a really good factory edge. It's a very nice factory edge. It's even all the way up, and it was sharp out of the box. It has a really good looking blade shape, and it is really good for a variety of tasks. The stonewash looks really good, or rather it did look good on this one. But it's got a swedge up here, full flat grind, really good slicing geometry, but it's still a strong blade shape for sure. There's not a whole lot of markings on the blade, which some people prefer. Yeah. The grip is good. It works well in a variety of different grips. I've had to use this knife in about every grip you can. There's no jimping up here, which maybe would be nice, but there's still a nice kind of ramp area for your thumb, so it still feels really good, even though there's no jimping there. That seems to be a theme of this knife, is no jimping when you need it. It has a really good lockup, if you can see that. It's about a quarter of the way down the tang of the blade, so plenty of lockup, a lot left for it to wear in with use. I did spine whack test it. Some people are very against spine whack testing. This is it's a cheap model, so I just figured I would do it for the hell of it, and it's a very strong lockup. I don't think it would ever close on your hands, so for hard use, I definitely think it's usable for that. The clip never irritates my hand. If you really bear down on it, you can definitely feel the clip about right here in the hand, but just the way the clip is molded and everything, it really does not get in the way. And then sometimes I use my knives upside down like this to slice up like that, and it feels really good in that grip too, although it's not perfect for it. It's easy to open and close quickly, which is very important at my job. It has a nice rounded over spine. It's not crowned, but the edges are knocked off, which is really nice, and the blade centering was perfect out of the box. You couldn't strike a fire steel with it if you care about that, but it's still a very nice, almost crown spine, just sort of chamfered off edges, which is always nice. The things I don't like about it is the main thing is the clip. The clip is horrible in my opinion. Some people don't like this bill coming up. A lot of people don't. It's like I've seen that on YouTube. Me personally, that doesn't bother me. But this, where they drilled the holes to get to those nice recessed deep clip screws, this area is really weak, and it's been caught on a couple things at work, and it bends out all the time. I've had to take this knife or this clip off the knife and bend it back at least 5 times. It is, and once it does it once, it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to keep happening, because once you bend metal back, it does get weaker. So I definitely either make the clip thicker or put 2 singular holes to get to the screws instead of this long one. I don't know. I just know that this clip is terrible. And I have carried a lot of knives that get caught, where the clip gets caught in material at work and it doesn't bend out. So there is a way to make a stronger clip. So obviously this one is just weaker for whatever reason. And I definitely don't like that. The clip also is not inset into the G10, which means that when these screws come loose, even though I've Loctited them, they have come loose, the clip will slide side to side on the scale material because the clip isn't inset. If it was, then it couldn't spin on the handle. So whenever I buy a knife now, I always kind of look for an inset clip, because that usually negates that problem. It's not reversible. It is reversible, which the inset is nice, because if it was reversible and it had the inset, there would be just a gap on this side and they'd have to put a plate in there, which would drive up the cost. But in my opinion, it's worth it to at least inset the right hand side, which majority of people are right-handed, because then you don't have to worry about the clip sliding around. It's a high polish clip. It's actually stone washed, but it's shiny and it looks kind of goofy sticking out of the pocket. Coatings, they wear out anyways, and a lot of people don't like the worn look of a pocket clip. But I appreciate that they stone washed it, but it is a little shiny sticking out of the pocket, which at work, draws attention. But that's a very small complaint. It's just me personally. I don't like a very shiny clip sticking out of my pocket. And again, I apologize for saying and that constantly. I'm just reading my notes, so I'm thinking. The screws are T6 for the clip, which T6 strips out pretty easy if you're using cheap tools, or even if you just don't have access to your tools at the time. And sometimes even with good bits, the T6 screws will strip, and it looks like every screw on this knife is T6, which I don't like. T8 should be the standard on all knives, just because it is a little stronger, a little more common. The next thing is that the handles are really thick and really heavy. The scales are just a little bit too thick, in my opinion. And the full steel liners, even though they're milled, it feels so robust that it circles back around to feeling cheap, if that makes any sense. And the balance is off for sure, because the handle is so thick. And in shorts, I definitely noticed that it was a really heavy knife. It's definitely weighing down your pocket pretty good. The detent when I got it was really, really stiff, but it did break in over time. But one reason that the detent being so stiff was a problem was that the flipper tab had no jimping when I got the knife. So I ended up cutting my own jimping in with a Dremel tool. It doesn't look great, but it's definitely way more functional than it was. My finger would slip off of the flipper tab about 50% of the time whenever I would try to use the knife. And that wasn't just me. I've had people borrow it, and they definitely did the same thing until I cut in the jimping. And I still slip off of it every now and again, but the jimping definitely was a huge upgrade. I definitely would recommend it if you already have this knife. Cutting in your own jimping, that is, if you can. It doesn't really matter how it looks. It is a tool. The scales have these notches for almost like I think it's to get to the flipper, which is nice, because if you come in a little high, then it just slips off of those notches and right onto the flipper. But it almost looks like it's for blade stops that would be on the blade, but there are none, like thumb studs that also double as blade stops. There are none. It has a traditional stop pin back here at the base of the flipper. So I'm not really sure what that's for, except for maybe a little bit more comfortable. If you accidentally come in a little high, it'll just run off. Either way, it just looks a little funny to me. So I'm not really sure what the philosophy was there behind that design. D2, the blade steel that they use, you know, it's a middle of the road steel. I feel like D2 is lacking, and I really don't understand why it's become the most common blade steel or the go-to for budget knives. This D2, in my opinion, feels a little soft. It's rolled, which is kind of strange. I feel like D2 would probably be more prone to chip than roll. It's always stropped and honed back easily. I use a ceramic hone and a leather strop, and it strops and hones really well back to sharp. So I'm not really sure. I loaned it to a non-knife person, and she used it to open a clam at the beach and rolled the tip, but it did hone back easily. So again, there is advantages to that. It does definitely sharpen up easily. I've used it for a tester for D2 just to see how I can. I've never oiled a knife, and it's definitely started to rust. I don't know if it shows up on camera, but definitely rusting for sure. And I'm just going to let it continue just to see how bad it'll get. The stonewashing, I can't remember if they say that the stonewash will help it not rust or it makes it more prone to rust. It definitely seems like it's more prone because I've had a lot of other D2 blades that haven't rusted. But again, I did take this one to the beach. The design is kind of forgettable. And so I took it to the beach because honestly, in a few months, if I had lost this thing or if it was stolen from me, I probably wouldn't even remember that I had it at one point. It definitely makes it a good user, but it's just, if you're a knife guy looking for a good looking design, you know, this one can be a little plain. Although I think it's a good looking knife, but it is a forgettable design. There's no real special features about it. That's a common complaint on YouTube too. I've seen people say that it's a forgettable knife, which I tend to agree with. The sharpening choil is pretty big. Definitely nice if you sharpen your own knives, which I do. I haven't had to sharpen this one yet. I've just honed it and stropped it quite a bit. It does get caught in material in your cutting sometimes, but any knife with a sharpening choil does, and you have a lot of usable blade before you get it stuck in that choil, so it doesn't happen as often with this knife as some others. Overall, I would say that I don't recommend it, which sounds harsh because it is a good knife. But I feel like there's a lot better options, and this knife has just enough quirks to make it to where I want to carry something else, or if I could do it again, I would buy something else. If you already bought it, I mean, don't worry, it'll serve you well. But I would recommend, you know, carry it and just try to notice all the small things that aren't optimal with it, and, you know, use that whenever you buy your next knife. And maybe you'll find your perfect EDC. This one definitely is not my perfect EDC. Like I said, obviously it is a good knife, but there's just enough things that make me not recommend it. In the price range, you know, $37. There's a lot of $37 D2 or even 14C28N, which I prefer that steel. There's a lot of better design knives out there for the money. This one almost feels like it's an old design, even though it's not. So definitely middle of the road for CJRB. They have a lot better models in their lineup. If you want to stick with CJRB, even for $37 or even cheaper, there's a lot better knives out there. But if you already have it, just use it. It's not gonna bother you much, I don't think. The pocket clip definitely is a major issue with this knife, in my opinion. It's given me a lot of trouble and it's annoyed the hell out of me. It's heavy, you know, all the things that I said. But it's not the worst knife in the world, but it's not good enough. I definitely wouldn't buy it again if I lost it. So, thanks for watching.